The 2-0 round has completed, and we have our first teams that have made the quarterfinals, LNG and GenG. Now, was this surprising? Not entirely. To go straight into it for the first series, I had LNG 2-0 over DK. That was correct. Now, why was that correct and what actually happened? So going into the series, I thought the problematic players that they have are Kingen and Moham. Both these guys are not playing, they're not contributing. You know, it's just not really helping the team overall. And of course, naturally, if your support is randomly dying, if your top laner is just randomly dying, and you have two players like this on your team, yeah, it's going to be hard to win games. Luckily enough, DK have had easier opponents compared to other teams, so far they've kind of escaped that. And I will say, LNG, after the first two games they played, they look like legit contenders. So that's already like a huge plus towards saying it's going to be a 2-0, right? So Kingen and Moham, like poor performances, like low, how would I say it? Low contributions, and he's just kind of like, I'm not gonna say it's winging it, and because he's definitely found some times where he's like actually performing and doing some things, but it's like he's just not playing well, right? 2, the mid matchup, or more like the mid pool. There is no advantage. To me, I thought there was no advantage for Showmaker. Showmaker plays like a wide set of picks. You know, he's like the guy who will play Silas. And guess what? Scout is the same person who will play these kinds of picks. So you're not really going to have a strict edge in that case compared to some of the other games that DK played. And Scout is playing very, very well. Like, he's played out of his mind. So you don't have that going for you, and your top and support are not playing the best. That's an issue. Like, this is your best player. So that's a big issue. And no real advantage. This is what I had, and that pretty much was true as well. Amy did fine. I mean, like, for the series, like especially the Ziggs game, like the second game for Ziggs, yeah, he killed it. Like, he was doing super, super well. And he was like kind of 1v5 at a point, but like I said, these two players were just not cutting it. They really were not cutting it. And a lot of this pointed to me that they would just lose. Like, why would they ever beat LNG when LNG just has good meta reads? Like, I thought like their meta, like their comps they create, oh man, that looks messy. Comps created were really good. I thought this was definitely like a key point for LNG. And that's what happened. They had really nice comps that they created to actually fight out. DK did not. So this was so now you have players underperforming. You're not having a real mid advantage, and the drafts are not necessarily going your way. They lost with Smolder mid. You know, we've been waiting to see what was going to happen to Smolder mid, as a lot of these teams are trying to like still play it. And I'll be honest, Silas was not exactly the end-all be-all kind of counter pick. At least they didn't get to have as much opportunity to play through mid due to making the play on top in the Renekton versus Olaf. And so getting around mid took too long. So Silas kind of suffered a little bit. And to be honest, in the first game, DK were actually doing perfectly fine because they were going through mid, right? They were going through mid, and then they can go into jungle and side. And so this worked really well for them. This was doing great. The problem was that Moham wanted to go into side first at times. And this was terrible. Sometimes they literally ignored just going into mid, and they were playing in the jungle first. So they kept doing these two, like they kept reversing these steps, and it resulted in some awkward fights or like situations that just got them caught. And once LNG like got advantage, it was hard to do anything. Like they just, if they can't go through mid anymore, they have literally nothing for them. And that's what happened. And there was opportunities for LNG, for DK to get back into it. And that's mostly because LNG overcommitted on the map. They had a terrible siege comp. Like, in terms of sieging, this was like a big no-no for them. They had to fight in the open space, And it took them like a good 2 fights where like they really screwed up and DK was climbing back for them to realize, like, okay, slow down, like play on Baron, play on Dragons, like bleed them out, and we'll win. So that eventually happened, right? And I also say that the fact that they won with Galio, like Scout on Galio, your best player on Galio, putting the entire game into Zika, I always forget how to say his name, into him, awesome. And I really wonder if like LNG realized just how bad Kingen is playing, and that because like to me they picked Camille in the 1-2, Camille in the 1-2 with a Renekton ban and with a Rumble and Jax ban. So those are kind of like big time picks that like can be annoying for her, right? There's still other options, but so they took it straight up, and they did not care what DK's answer would be. They literally had zero care. They did not assume like they would be able to create a plan to beat the Camille, and they couldn't. They literally couldn't. So that was an amazing call out by LNG. So yeah, I think the coaching staff there did amazing. I think the players are doing great. Zika to me was for sure the like MVP of the series. Like he really did own it up, and I'm pretty excited. I mean, I'm very excited to see where this goes because these guys do look, like I said, contenders. And so that's 2 out of 2 points for me. Woo! 2 out of 2 points. Let's go. Now, unfortunately for the next series, I had a 2-1 for HLE. So wrong team and wrong scoreline. So that is 0 out of 2 points for me there. Unfortunate. But let's get into it. So going into this series, I anticipated that the meta could be similar to like how it was before for how these teams have shown. And that was partially true, but I think GenG did take the right direction, and HLE just had really bad adaptation. Like in terms of like drafting and like I said, adaptations, I don't know. I really don't know what was going through their head, because look at the first game, right? In the first game, this is where they first showed Aurora. They showed Aurora, Nocturne, Ari, right? For some odd reason, the way HLE saw this was to pick Gnar, which I'm going to say right now, and this has been the case for forever since Aurora's been released, she beats Gnar, like big time. Like this is like an impossible matchup for Gnar to play. If he walks up and gets, like he will just walk up, he'll get chunked. He can't ever land his shit on her for the most part. Like she can literally time her R to dodge the Gnar Mega, like the Gnar Mega R. It's just, it's a terrible matchup. And they kept blind picking Nocturne. And I think the Seju, this idea of Seju was good. You know, like Nocturne into a tank, can't do as much. I think this was actually not a bad option, right? And then the first game they had Yone, but Yone could just like win in general cases. Then they had Akali, and then they eventually landed back on the Smolder, right? So my first thought going into this was, okay, so GenG, of course, in game 1, they picked Aurora like in the 1-2 with a Nocturne. Of course, the Aurora is going to flex. Like, you'll never pick Aurora super early on without having some flexibility in it, because there are definitely mid matchups that are just not fun to play for her. There's just not. And the same can be said for some matchups in top, but generally in top lane, she's like safe to blind and play. Okay, you take Gnar, a bad matchup, knowing it could be a bad matchup and they can flex it still, and you chose that. That didn't make sense. Seju, like I said, not too bad. Yone, power pick. Okay, cool. We repeat this in game 3. By the way, like this gets repeated in game 3, like the same stuff. Like this continues into game 3 for some odd reason. Whatever. And keep in mind, in this first game, you know, like it's playable. It's not the greatest. You know, when you see these like matchups too, they're naturally gonna lane swap. Get out of this situation. We don't want to play this because they had a bad top matchup and they had a bad bot matchup. But we're playing against Varus Renata. Absolutely not. We're not playing into that, right? That is not a thing. So there was going to be a lane swap. And the lane swaps today were okay, not great. I think GenG first game, they could have easily invaded topside, got Envision to see if HLE were going to lane swap, and then they could just play off that, but they failed. And that was kind of weird to see. It was very weird to see. So that could have been better. But regardless, the first game, GenG has control the entire time. Like, they have pushed, like, the way they're drafting in this series is they drafted, like, priority lanes, get tempo, keep it with good bases, like perfect basing, you know? Priority lanes, tempo, keep it up, and then just choke with no mistakes. This is pretty much what they did. They were playing for a very steady lead. There was nothing explosive in there. Like, yes, depending on like how the fight goes, they could have explosive win. But generally, it was just keeping this because they had a lot of like potential pick power, and fighting can be really awkward with the Nocturne R. So they were just playing on that space, that lead, and if you have one bad fight, then the other team catches up instantly, and now like it becomes hard. That is the downside of their comp, right? But for the most part, if they play really well, it's obnoxious because you can't break it, right? So that was happening in the first game until the Delight 4-man Rel engaged on midwave. And then once that happened, they lost all momentum. And it became really hard. Even though they had 3 dragons to 1 dragon, it was just way too hard for GenG to like climb back out of that. Because now suddenly HLE is in position first in many cases, and they have an easier time of playing around. Before, GenG just stayed ahead on the map all the time. With a comp that's good that's staying ahead, so be it, right? So naturally, going into the second game, the way... Oh, so I just realized that my camera is... Oh, I deleted it all. Oh, it's okay. Anyways, yeah, I realized my camera was blocking it. Anyways, basically, like I said, from what I explained on the right side, it was just looking at priority lanes, gaining tempo, playing with no mistakes, and just snowballing from there, right? So going into game 2, right? Oh, nice. It's back, actually. Huge. So going into game 2, I'm going to move my camera over here. So going into game 2, right? We run it back. Same stuff. They play this the entire time through, right? This time they play Vi, right? This was terrible. This was so bad. Playing Vi. Vi cannot play into Nocturne. She can't see anything. You can't use your R that well. Like, Nocturne just beats you in the 1v1. This went terrible. And they chose Akali, and the thing is, it was not half bad because there are still moments where they could have maybe made something happen, like an outplay because they're playing Akali, and so they're like, that was cool. Like, they had those moments. But the game was still so hard because you were depending on these moments, and they couldn't make it through. Bad jungle pick, you know, it just couldn't work. Okay. And also they played Rumble this game, just to say that. Like, they played Rumble. This actually was a much better pick, by the way. That was so much better playing into Aurora, but it's still they still couldn't really do too much. Okay, so after these 2 games, you know, after you saw the same comp these 2 games, surely in the back of the minds for HLE, they would say, we need to ban something. Like, we need them to not run the same comp because it's really obnoxious. You know, I'm really tired of playing behind every early game and having to like have an uphill battle and try to find these moments to win out. Especially because it's Peanut. Like, Peanut obviously wants to make plays and do things. And same with Delight. But they didn't do that. Like, they actually went back to Seju Nar with a Smolder. And the Smolder was fine. So, to be honest, the Smolder ended up being fine because it's against Ari, not a big deal. But you're playing the bad matchup of Nar into Aurora again. Doran had an awful time just like timing his megas with objectives. And it just, it just kind of fell flat. Meanwhile, if you look at what GenG was doing in the bot lane, they went Varus Renata. Okay, it was alright, but like I think he went the wrong build. He should have went lethality, not on hit. Then he swapped to Kalista. And that was a way better option for them. Like getting away from the Varus, screw that. Get onto the Kalista. This will help. This will be better. We'll play this better. Cool. And then in the last game, they chose Twitch. So now we adapted one more time with a very obscure pick. You would not expect this at all. And it makes perfect sense. Like, what on earth was HLE going to do once the Nocturne R came on? Like, you can't see anything. The Twitch outranges you heavily. You don't even have, like, the best pull. And you're basically depending on the Smolder to, like, save you. Like, this was literally all they were praying on, was this pick was going to save him. And that was their thought process. Like, yeah, we'll just be able to stay even, and then the Smolder will win us the game. No, it doesn't really work that way. And GenG just ran them really hard. Even though they made a mistake in the lane swap, they ran them super hard. And so I feel like this is just a failure of HLE to actually, like, see what's happening. Like, adapt to what's happening. And congrats to GenG, because in the end of the day, GenG look good. I mean, they're finding their style, their rhythm a bit. Obviously they were contenders going into this tournament, and they will remain contenders. And so it's a big plus to see that they actually are moving away and learning their lessons from the first 2 days. I feel like HLE did not. I feel like they did not learn their lessons. I think they're still fine because they have plenty of time to, like, figure their shit out. But it's a good sign for GenG and not the best of signs for HLE. For DK, it's definitely a bad sign, because now it's like, oh god, like, these guys are not turning it around. And for LNG, it's like, hell yeah. Hell yeah. So at this point in time, yeah, I think these are two really good first seeds going into Worlds quarterfinals. We'll see how tomorrow shapes up and the day after, but so far, I gotta say, pretty good. Pretty good, honestly, first, like qualifying matches, honestly, and for best of threes too. I'm very interested to see how the meta is going to continue to shape up, especially while we're having, like, now maybe Nocturne will be a huge priority going into day 2 with, like, these teams, the 1-1 teams. Maybe Nocturne will be, like, a huge priority to them. Not sure. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and make sure to leave a comment on what your predictions were, how you think tomorrow's going to go. Until next time.